If you're struggling to find your own voice in your creative expression or find a focus with something that you're creating, I'm going to talk about that today and why it's more difficult to get into flow and ease during some stages of the creative process. So, I'm going to talk about this as it relates to me because I think this is a practical application that a lot of us struggle with and that is marketing. So I am right now working on marketing, which is the bane of my existence. I seriously do not like it. It's a real struggle for me, and so I'm going to talk about the creative process in this way and using this example. And so I am going to talk about my 4 stages of the creative process. So I have been studying the creative process. I've been studying flow, intuition for a long time. And so I've come up with this over the past 5 years of studying this. And so I'm not going to talk about them all the stages in this video. And I'm going to talk about them more in the next following weeks and in my upcoming free meetup this Thursday. But so I just want to talk about the first stage is, and I talk about them as flow. So the first stage is finding inspiration or finding your purpose. And so finding inspiration. So when we start to learn something, it's a process, right? And the very first stage, a lot of people really, it's kind of almost the hardest stage because what we're doing is we're learning something new, right? And we are exploring, we are finding inspiration, we're finding maybe somebody else's inspiration, right? So when it comes to like marketing, I'm learning something new, right? So what have I done? I have consulted people, I have learned from other people. So I talk a lot about making things your own, finding your own voice, but really it's like we need to start somewhere, right? We need to start with those expanders, those people who can teach us, but we don't want to stop there. So what happens is in this first stage is that it's difficult because our cognitive brain, our cognitive function is working overtime. So it's really, really hard to get into flow in this stage because you're having to learn a process, right? So for instance, with marketing, I had a coach and she would tell me things that I didn't want to hear. And I was learning her process, right? And so it's difficult because you're sort of like retraining, you're creating new neural pathways. If you look at brain scans of people who are learning something, their brain's actually functioning a lot more. Like there's a lot of activation in the brain. It's really working overtime, as opposed to when you're in flow, your brain isn't working that hard. So this can be exacerbated if you have trauma with any kind of learning, you have anxiety, you have like perfectionism where you're having all these shoulds in your brain. So you're trying to learn something and then you're also kind of like shoulding on yourself and trying to perfect it. And really trying, and so you have all these voices, the inner critic. So your inner critic can be really online in this first stage. So that's why it's really important in this first stage to play and explore. And a lot of people come to me and they say like they're really frustrated because they're not able to focus. But they're in this stage where it's actually just really important to learn through play. And if you think about kids, that's how they learn and that's how they grow. And, they're not, if they're very young, they're probably not beating up on themselves so much because they don't have that logical mind kind of spinning out. So learning through play And then, where we want to get to is actually the third step, which is where it's called opening up to possibilities. So this is when we begin to take what we've learned, right? So I learned all of these things about marketing, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, or, practical kind of formulas, right? So when we're wanting to find our own voice, find our own focus, we want to get to this stage where we are integrating what we have learned with our own novel concepts based on who we authentically are. So this connection to ourself. And it's really hard to make the jump from learning something. So let's say you're like learning how to paint, right? Or learning how to cook, and you learn the formula, but we all want to create something new and like unique. It's our essence wanting to come out. So making the leap from stage 1 to stage 3, where you're basically making these connections of who you are and the unique things about you that make you stand out. So I'm taking the marketing and I'm wanting to make it my own voice, right? And so it's difficult, right? So I've got all of these, for me, I have a ton of anxiety and performance anxiety and wanting to make things right. And I'm really good at following directions, so I have that all in my mind. So I don't want to give too much away, but stage 2 is letting go of expectations and letting go of what holds you back, which could be fears, anxiety, could be all kinds of things, but a lot of times it's expectations. So like for me, I'm creating this marketing, and I have this expectation of what I feel like it should be, right? And I think that's where a lot of us get really tripped up, is because we're so trained to stay at that formulaic level, right? You need to do the paint by numbers. You need it to look exactly like this. But we really want to transition to stage 3, and ultimately to stage 4, which I'm not going to tell you about. But so letting go of those expectations. If you want to find out more about how to do this and this process, I'm going to talk at length about it in my free meetup, and also my new masterclass that's coming up. And so stay tuned for that. I'm really excited about that. Get on my newsletter, follow me here. I'm going to be talking about this creative process throughout the month. So hope this has helped you. Please be kind to yourself. It really is just the process. More you can be kind to yourself and play and recognize